Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Wednesday, December the 21st, 2022. Getting almost till Christmas time. Listen, guys, there's a lot going on in the world. We're going to open up the charts right now, and we're going to take a look at some of the stuff going on. And let's start the charts right here and take a look. First thing I want to show you guys is there is a winter kill risk of the United States wheat harvest. An imminent cold blast. A really, really bad cold blast. The worst we've seen. It's pouring right down out of Canada. And some of the temperatures are as low as minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see it here represented in the purple. Going all the way down to the southern tip of Texas. Now, do you remember we had power outage problems? The interesting thing about the grid, the electrical grid, there's a western part of the grid, and there's a Texas grid, and then there's an East Coast grid. This puts tremendous strain on the grid, and we can see it's going to put tremendous strain on the Texas part of the grid again, once again. We remember the problems they had last time in Texas when they had a cold front of this magnitude that went through and the power shut off. And why that's a problem is people just aren't ready for that. Their homes, most of them are electric heat. And so a lot of people don't even have a generator. And at any rate, you can see where that would represent a problem. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is there's a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill that is being pitched by the House, being pitched, and this Republicans versus Senate. Let's see, where does it talk about this bill here? It says that earlier Tuesday, U.S. lawmakers unveiled a spending bill for the fiscal year. I'll highlight it for you guys where I'm reading. Fiscal year 2023, which started on October 1st, 2022. Rejection of this proposal would lead to a government partial shutdown after December 23rd, Friday. The bipartisan bill contains $858 billion in military spending and $772 billion in non-defense discretionary spending. Well, you know what discretionary spending means? $772 billion in discretionary spending. Excuse me. Do you know what that means? That means there's 772, almost $1 trillion, that they can spend on whatever the heck they want. Party time! You know, for the government. You know, I mean, we don't really care anymore. They've been basically doing that for years. Just do whatever they want with the money, you know. And it's just shut your blind eye over here while they stack up the trillions that we owe over there that we can never pay anymore at this point. So, what the heck? Go ahead. Spend as much as you want, guys. Oh, $44 billion for Ukraine? Send them $50 billion. Send them $100 billion. Who cares? Because now it's got to the certain point where we can't ever pay this off anyway. We're kind of like the guy who's ran up all of his credit cards, you know, and they send him some new cards, and he's just going to take the new cards and use them to pay off the old cards. I mean, what the heck? I mean, just go right on ahead, spend it. That's great. You know, whatever it takes, as Mario Draghi used to say, whatever it takes now at this point. I mean, we've went way past the point where you can ever repair this sucker. It's over. Anyway, so here's Zelensky. He's coming over to address Congress Wednesday as lawmakers debate a $45 billion Ukraine aid bill. He's going to address Congress. That's really something. A foreign leader addressing Congress. That's very interesting. But at any rate, I can understand why he wants to defend Ukraine. Just to think, that we could have, like, maybe less than 2 years ago, we had the opportunity here in the West to solve this whole problem by giving Russia assurances. Just basically a piece of paper that says, no, Ukraine will never join NATO. That's all they wanted, was a piece of paper saying that it would never happen, that they'd never join NATO. They just wanted assurances. Just basically saying, yes, we recognize that you are a superpower and you've got all these nuclear weapons, and yes, we recognize blah, blah, blah. They could have just wrote him a slip of paper and send it to Putin, and it would have all been over, not even started, and we would have never been in this war. Now we're racking up $45 billion, what, twice a year or whatever. However, I don't know what the schedule is. I think they already sent them $45 billion, didn't they? And $45 billion more. Well, this is going to rack up the U.S. debt even faster. And look, it's actually needed. And I know you guys are listening to the way I'm talking. You're saying, hey, Glenn, come on, this isn't needed. No, it is needed. I'll explain to you why. Now that we've got Russia on the rampage, now that the bear is awake and it's roaring through, right? It wouldn't stop at Ukraine. Do you think they're going to stop? They're building up an offensive like you have never seen before right now. They said that they're going to mobilize, the Russians are going to mobilize 5 million men if they have to. They're spending 30% of their whole entire budget on military right now. They mean to win this thing. And what does that mean? You're saying, well, what does that mean? They mean to win this thing. Well, if they can beat Ukraine, then they're going to move through Europe. They got their sights on Berlin. And you say, Glenn, that can't be true. Yes, it is true. And after they've stomped through Berlin, they got their sights on the United States and Canada and every country on earth. They mean to take over. Them linked together with China, linked together with, because when they start to win, if they can win, who do you think is going to hop on board with them? The whole eastern half of the world. That's who. All the countries over there that are linked in with the BRICS nations. This won't be just Russia alone if Russia starts to win this thing. It won't be just Russia by itself. It'll be all of the eastern nations. The whole BRICS will hop in, and they got I think it's like half of the world's population, and they got half of the world's everything. They could seriously, if they all link together, they could seriously win this thing. And you know what that means? Don't even want to talk about it. If they were to win World War III. So, the only thing holding them back now is the dam right now. That's holding all that back is a victory in Ukraine. And we got ourselves into this by not giving Russia these assurances early on. But now it's done. What's done is done. The milk has been spilt. There's no sense crying over it anymore. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. They need this $45 billion in order to keep fighting. And they possibly even need more. But what does it really matter in the whole sense of things anyway? Because they're going to spend $755 billion on discretionary spending, meaning they can spend it on whatever they want. That's the bigger apple. A lot bigger than $45 billion. I'd say $755 billion is bigger than $45 billion by many times. And they can spend it on things like studying how roaches behave in Madagascar. You know, they can spend it on things like studying how to make new textbooks for our kids that teach some things that they shouldn't be learning. You know, stuff like that. They can spend it on just garbage. Your tax-paying dollars. They can build more nuclear weapons with that money, because part of that's for the defense budget. Okay, and so I mean, what's another $45 billion? That's like denying the. That's like going into a restaurant. You're already fat, and you order $300 worth of food, and now you say, "Well, I'm not going to have that ice cream." So what? You know, I mean. At this stage in the game, they've got us so far in debt, who the hell cares? What's another $45 billion? Nothing compared to what they've got us in debt. We can't ever pay it off, and so the only way to do it is to write the whole thing off in the end. Just write it all off, you know? Write the whole thing off. I mean, this is the way with war, too. You got to understand something about war. Once it gets going, at that point, you need to defend yourself. And it could be a small-scale war. It could be two families feuding. you know, in the hills and somewhere in the Ozarks. It's okay once it's not started, but once it gets started, then you've got to pitch in and defend yourself, because they mean to do you in. It's as simple as that. That's war. So Russia now, they mean to push as far west as they can. And they don't have good things in mind for all of us. You know? And I mean, this is war. This is conquest. You know, the four horses of the apocalypse, you know? You get conquest, and then you get war, and you get... What's the other ones? I can't think of them all right now. There's a red horse and white horse and the pale horse and the black horse and so on. There's a number of horses. And each horse represents something. And ultimately, you know, I mean, this is where we're going. And silver price today is roughly $24. It's down 16 cents, but it's not really down. It's just bobbling along in the same path that it was in yesterday. And that's good because we're up overall. Gold, $18.17. It's down $1.30. You got to understand something about silver. Here we go, boys. I mean, we were like $18 and change there not that long ago. Just a number of shows ago. You just look back and you can see my shows are a record. By the way, listen. My shows are a record of what's going on in the financial system, because every time I do one of these shows, and this goes back years, you want to find out what's happening in the markets at a certain date, use my channel. You can go through just like a library, and you can find out just exactly not only what's happening within the markets, within the framework of the markets, but you can also see the charts and see where the markets were at any particular date. It's a great resource now at this point, because it goes back for like 7 years here, and it's getting longer all the time, you know. And I mean, it's just every day, like right now, there's a record right now of where gold and silver is right now, and cryptos today, we're looking at Bitcoin at 16,857 and Ethereum at 1,215. So it's a record of what's going on. The Dow Jones today is up 555 points on thin air. I'll tell you about this. As long as the Dow and the S&P 500 and such, and oil, everything may remain relatively stable, which they are, the Fed's going to continue to tighten. And tighten and tighten and tighten. As long as they can get away with tightening, they're going to tighten. It's until they get their hands slapped. And you know how they get their hands slapped is when everything falls off, when the markets fall. Then they're like, ooh, and they'll stop their tightening thing, and they'll go back to looser monetary policy. But the markets are not willing to, as long as the markets can see a light at the end of the tunnel, then the markets are going to continue to stay stable. And so it's a catch-22 here between the two, and we're going to see which side breaks. But ultimately, it's like a game of chicken, where two cars are heading toward each other on the highway at high speed. And so ultimately, if they both stay on the course, it will crash. Ultimately, in the end, you know, I mean, it's how far can it go? It's very interesting to watch, but it's like it's so slow, though. It's like watching grass grow. It's happening so slow. But it is very interesting if you've been following it all along. The S&P 500 is up 60 points on the day at 3,881. And now we're going to take a look at oil at 78.19 on the day so far. It's up 2.57%. Bonds and rates today. We're looking at rising yields on the longest of the long end and falling yields on the short end, but it's only minimal, the falling. The U.S. 10 years at 3.67, and it's fell a half a basis point. And the U.S. 30 year has risen 1.5 basis points at 3.75. Now the dollar index today is at 104.19, and it's a lot of volatility in the dollar today. It's up, down, up, down. So see, it was up to 104.17, and then it fell all the way down to 103.89, and then it was back up to 104.14, and then it fell back down to roughly 103, 103.99 again, and back up. So it's bouncing between 103 and 104. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Hit that notification icon so you can see more and know when I'm on. I'm on every day though, unless it's a day when Christmas Day or whatever, or markets are closed for one reason or another. You know, I miss a few days, but hardly ever. I'm right here following these markets to give you guys this record of what happened, the record of the great financial crash of the 21st century. The financial crash that saw the world's population cut in half. That's basically what we're looking at here. And so half of the territories, like the world has expanded out, like, you know, cities and everything have expanded out, and they're all full right now of people because the people needed the homes, and they built the homes, and they built suburbs and everything else. And when the world's population's cut right in half, doing, half of the homes are going to be empty. You ever think about that? And those lands are going to fall into disrepair. And this is why we're going to have the Badlands, what I call the Badlands, which is areas where the power grid just doesn't, they don't bother maintaining it any longer, let's put it that way. And the areas where they do have the grid up and maintained is going to be areas that are going to be under very tight control. Computers is a method of control. Internet is a method of control. It's a control mechanism. And that control mechanism comes down to, you are going to be a number in the end. You're going to be assigned a number, probably going to stamp it, some sort of microchip or whatever, probably just under your skin or someplace like that. And in order to open up any door to any place, the doors are going to have sensors inside them, and when you walk by, the door is going to slam shut in your face if you haven't got the number, the microchip, whatever. You want to go and get groceries, bang, the door's shut, and there'll be a silent alarm going off so they can come get you, because that'll mean you've entered from the Badlands someplace into the city areas, and you're trying to get food, and they'll have you. And what they'll probably do is they'll probably load you into a paddy wagon and deport you back into the Badlands, where you don't have any internet and you don't have any, and so it's going to be like a two-tier society. You're going to have to be registered if you want to live in the society that's under tight control, the control grid society. And if you want to enter into the Badlands from the control grid area, you're going to have a special permit and a reason why you want to go there, you know. And so large areas are going to be the Badlands, and this is what they're going to call, they're going to have a name for it, eco-friendly areas or whatever, where they believe they're conservation and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be called. It's not going to be called the Badlands. I'm calling it the Badlands, but it's going to be like a wildlife conservation areas and stuff like that. They're going to name it, or watershed area or whatever, you know. They'll name it so it all sounds good and everything, but it's really going to be the same thing I'm talking about, like Badlands and Goodlands. They're not really going to be good lands, because they're going to be dystopian control areas. And the people that live out in these what called the Badlands, you know, they're going to live kind of a free lifestyle, doing what they want. You know, they'll have little tiny towns and stuff, you know, like little barter areas. They can go in and trade things for, you raise chickens, you can trade your eggs in for this or that, and gold and silver is going to be the money of choice of these areas. Where in city areas, where they have the internet, they're going to use cryptocurrencies of one form or another. It might be government-controlled cryptocurrencies, or it might be decentralized cryptocurrencies, because they'll have the internet. And you have to have the internet to run money that's not connected to the electronic money. You have to have the internet. It doesn't work without the internet. So in these areas I call the Badlands, they're not going to have the internet unless it comes in from space, and they're not going to let them have that technology because it's counterproductive. Because that technology is what's going to lead to them having smart technology in order to create. They know that the people in the Badlands, if they get the high technology, they'll be able to wage guerrilla warfare, and they're not going to let them have that technology. They're going to take it from them to maintain control, so that the areas that have the power grid and the areas that have the internet are going to be such high technologically advanced societies that they're not going to want to be raided by the people out in the Badland. In fact, they're not going to let them group together too much and get organized too much. They're going to keep them in a state of if they get too organized, they'll fly in and bomb them or whatever they have to do to keep them down and keep them subdued. And so it's going to be a dystopic, where we're headed is a dystopic type world. And there's two routes we can get there. We already can see. One is the war could bring us to that point of losing half the world's population very suddenly with a nuclear war. And the other is the financial system collapsing, and the collapse of organized society with the collapse of the financial system. And either way it goes, whether it's a war that does it or it's a collapse of the financial system, which would be a little bit slower, either way it leads to the same thing in the end. A loss of probably at least half of the world's population, if not more. And the main thing that why we're going to lose half of the population of the world is basically it comes down to mostly food and water. They're going to starve, and they're going to dehydrate, and they're going to have a lot of disease. Diseases that if we thought we've eradicated are going to come back strong and take out a lot of people and other people. I mean, it's just going to be a time when human life, it's going to be a short period in human history, probably not going to last very long at all. When I say not very long, I'm talking in looking in the long term. It's probably going to be less than 2 years. A very short period in human history. Actually, you could probably condense it down. The worst part of it's probably only going to be 4 to 6 months long. So a very short period indeed of time, where human life is not going to be worth 5 cents because there's going to be so much death. So many people just dying from natural causes. Well, you could call it natural causes. Starvation, waterborne illness, things like yellow fever, malaria, all these diseases we thought you were eradicated will come back strong. Tuberculosis, on and on and on it goes. Because you're not going to be able to get the medications to fight them. See, you got to have an organized society just to have antibiotics. And in this kind of society, when the society goes into dissolution, I think it is called, when it just dissolves. It's like the fall of the Roman Empire. And this is what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about society dissolving from two things out there. One may or may not happen, the war. It would dissolve society. It may or may not happen. Not sure. It looks like it might happen, but not sure. Anything could happen with that. That's not 100% guaranteed. But what is 100% guaranteed to happen is the failure of the currency. That is math. It has to happen. It's 100%. So if one doesn't get us, the other one's going to. It's just going to take a little bit longer to get here. The failure of the currency. Because they just cannot keep kicking that can down the road. Like I said earlier in my show, they're just, what's another $45 billion? They're just throwing the money out there. Oh, $755 billion for discretionary spending. That means they can spend it on whatever the hell they want. Oh, and another $800 billion for military defense or whatever. You know, and throw in another $45 billion. That kind of spending. An omnibus bill. Oh, yeah, and we'll have another omnibus bill 2 months from now. Blah, blah, blah. Spending wild and handsome. And this is when they're trying to cut back. Cutting back on one side and spending on the other. Oh, yeah, that's sure to really stop the inflation, I imagine. This is where we're going, guys. Can't you see it coming? One of the two is going to get us. Anyway, I've ranted enough. Thank you guys for watching my show, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.